Everyone can see? And also just pipe up in the chat box if you have any questions or if you want to flag something or if you want to share with us. We're going to have a question time at the end as well, which I think is going to be super useful just to, share your own experiences, your own challenges, and really, get you to a place where you are understanding more about the process, what other people are going through, what works for them, and so on. Hello. So again, just because everyone is now here and now joined, the reason we are doing these is to really kind of get to a place where we are sharing the knowledge amongst the group, right? We are going to be asking you and be sort of, creating these resources and these trainings to allow you to really understand more about the processes that you're going on, to be able to implement more of what you need to implement in order to obviously see amazing results. So today's session, what we're looking at doing is fat loss made simple. Everyone is experiencing or wants to experience some form of fat loss. And so what we wanted to do is to take the confusion away. And I asked you a question when I sent out the invitation. And don't worry, I will not go through all of these, but thank you everyone for sharing. I will kind of share generally what have been the issues, what do people struggle with most. That may be in relation to slow progress, hitting plateaus, managing stress levels, stubborn areas of body fat, usually around the midsection, snacking or grazing, socializing, weekends, cravings, all of this kind of stuff. And so these tend to be issues that we come up against, right? And before we can get tactical with managing, the practicalities of these lifestyle challenges, we need to understand really what conditions need to be met in order to achieve fat loss in the first place. So this is incredibly fundamental and super, super important for you to understand in order to obviously progress along this fat loss journey. And that is the calorie deficit. Now, I'm sure you have probably heard about this before. Pipe up in the chat box if this is news to you, if you haven't heard about it, or if you are familiar with it, because really understanding this is super, super important to the the success of your fat loss. And so what we want to kind of understand, first of all, is what is a calorie deficit, right? So a calorie deficit is essentially when your body burns more energy than it consumes, okay? So fat loss can only happen when you are in this calorie deficit. So I'll read that again. A calorie deficit is when your body uses more energy or burns more energy than it consumes. And so I have come up with this bank account analogy. And hopefully this will allow you to understand a bit more about it. So if you're spending more money than you deposit, right, in your bank account, your savings go down. Therefore, that's similar to the fat loss. So if you burn more calories than you eat, your body will burn fat. And so if you deposit more than you spend, your savings will grow. So you will gain fat. If you eat more than you burn, you will put on body fat and or muscle. And then if you deposit as much as you spend, your savings or your weight will stay the same. So hopefully everyone knows that from personal experience when they're managing their finances. And the important thing here is as well, it is across a daily, a weekly or a monthly occasion, right? It's not like you can sort of spend more one day and then make it up the next day or vice versa. It doesn't necessarily work like that. So it's the consistency over time, as myself and Marvin often harp on about, that is going to get you to that point. And I want to go a little deeper into this so you understand what really contributes to the calorie deficit, how that is broken down. And so don't worry too much about the sort of more, physiological terms here. But this really is understanding what your body burns during the day or how it burns calories during the day. So essentially on this side here, we've got your basal metabolic rate. And what this is if you were to do nothing all day, if you had one of those, sit on the sofa, binge Netflix all day, your body would burn a certain amount of calories, just keeping you alive. just, doing its normal bodily processes, its normal functions, maintaining muscle mass, managing the immune system, all of that kind of stuff. So that is the large chunk of your calorie expenditure during the day. And this number, or this sort of amount of calories burned, increases when you are increasing your muscle mass, right? Because muscle mass is very calorie demanding. So this is why, and we'll come down to it, strength training is very important. We also have a sort of often forgotten element, and that is the calories required to break down the food that we eat. So that breakdown process doesn't just happen. It needs energy in order to break down the protein, the carbohydrates, the vegetables, etc. Also, another big one here, which is NEAT. So this is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So what this basically means is the calories you burn just from moving around your day. That could be, going up and down the stairs, going from the car to the office, whatever that might be. And so that actually is a considerable amount of energy that you can burn during the day just from moving. I know things here in Saudi can be quite challenging when it comes to that, but this is something, again, that we'll touch on in a moment. And then lastly, exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is really the calories burned from performing exercise. So as you can see out of all of this one, time spent in the gym training is always going to be the least. And the reason for that is you can only really work out for an hour and a half tops during the day. You may be doing more, but then arguably you're probably not training with a good degree of intensity. You're probably just on your phone or whatever that might be. But this really is a small amount in the grand scheme of things. And so a lot of the time, actually, we think, okay, we need to work out more. We need to work out more. In fact, the biggest area we are going to see impact is, firstly, increasing muscle mass, and then also increasing our daily movement during the day. So I want you to understand sort of the three ways our body weight can go, right? If we are eating the same as we're burning, for example, so I'll pluck some numbers out of the air. If we're burning 2,000 calories and we're eating 2,000 calories, then our weight will stay the same. If we are, say, burning 2,000 calories here and we're eating maybe, 2,200 calories, then those extra calories we take into our body, it will store it as body fat or muscle mass, depending obviously what we're doing in terms of training. So this is where we see the weight gain over time, because ultimately we are eating more than we are using. And lastly, this is where we want to be, the calorie deficit. And that is where we are eating less than our body is burning. So I hope that makes sense so far. And so just to hang on that calorie deficit for a moment, this shortfall, in order for our body to burn all these calories, this shortfall needs to be got from somewhere. And so the body, what it will do to get more energy is to either break down muscle mass, or it will break down body fat to basically keep up with what the energy demands of the body are. So even the best workouts and the most healthiest eating won't lead to fat loss unless you are in a calorie deficit. So I guess how many times have you heard people say, or maybe yourself even say, I'm not losing weight even though I'm eating healthily, or even though I may be working out 5-6 times a week, I just can't seem to lose weight. And ultimately, that is because you are not in this calorie deficit, or they are not in this calorie deficit consistently over time. So what are the best ways to create that calorie deficit? And I've touched on this already. Trying to work out more during the week is a recipe for disaster. We really want to focus on that quality and that mindful nutrition. We want to focus, which is basically bringing this big bar down to beneath here. And then we want to focus on an active daily lifestyle. So here in Saudi, the average number of steps someone gets a day is around 3,500. That is like average. And so in, say, the UK, in London, you know, as you probably know, when you go on holiday to Europe or whatever, and you're smashing 15, 20, 25,000 steps a day, no problem, and you don't seem to gain weight on that trip, or maybe you even lose weight, what's happening is this NEAT, this non-exercise activity thermogenesis is increased tremendously. So you're burning a lot more throughout the day. And so strength training helps for sure, but fat loss ultimately happens because of the overall balance between what you eat and how much you're moving. And so, as the old adage says, you can't outtrain a bad diet. Now, Marvin is going to chip in here. I'm sure you're bored of my voice, but he's going to take you through a little bit around like how do we get into that calorie deficit? Because I think probably the question on your mind is how many calories do I need? What do I need to hit? And there's a reason why we don't actually look at that within obviously what we do. We focus on these other areas. So I'll pass on to Marvin now.
So the calorie counting that a lot of people tend to think is necessary for achieving this calorie deficit is obviously, as Pete said, not necessarily necessary, because we can figure out how to achieve this calorie deficit by using the targets that we set, right? When you first join and when you've done your lock and load call with Pete and he set targets for you, he's seen how you're currently eating. We set targets based on what we know you can do, what's achievable, but also what we know will yield results. So your weekly training sessions, most people start at, maybe 2, 3, bumping it up to 4 so that we can overall increase the amount of movement that you're doing. The daily step target, which is a really, really, really important one. I mean, Pete's already touched on that and how, in Saudi, we barely move. I know Sandra's not in Saudi, so she can't really relate. But it's definitely, this is a really, really important one, because that daily step target, if you're hitting that target, you are then increasing that NEAT that we spoke about already. The daily servings of protein are important because I actually just piped up in the chat and mentioned how protein is actually one of the 3 macronutrients, the one that actually uses more energy to digest. So the more protein you eat, the more energy your body is using to digest that protein. So obviously that's a win-win. Hence why we're always talking about protein amongst many other reasons. The fruits and vegetables are also in there because this is an easy way to reduce the total calories. Like imagine how much calories are in, let's say, for example, a croissant versus, an apple. Massive difference, So it's an easy way to do that without necessarily counting the calories. And then the free meals. Speaking of croissants, this is where all these extra calories tend to come in from, the croissants and the burgers and all that sort of stuff. So this feedback or this data that we give you, these targets that we give you, some people think it's just a thumb suck. It's not. These are very, very, very important to hit. And we think about this before we give them to you. And they're really, really important because this is what's going to help you get that calorie deficit.
Nice. And I think, one thing to touch on there is, the calorie deficit moves with time, right? As you get deeper into your fat loss journey, there's going to be less of you, right? And so if we go back to this chart here, and I think, Ajwad, you were someone who said you kind of, the slow progress is what kills you, or, you hit the plateau. And so the reason for that is as you lose weight. So for example, if you're 100 kilos and now you weigh 90 kilos, there's less of you. And so 9 times out of 10, your BMR is going to actually reduce. And therefore, once you thought you were in a calorie deficit, now because the BMR has reduced, you're now probably sitting at maintenance. And so that is why, as you get deeper into your fat loss journey, you then need to ultimately do more to some degree. You even need to step up your training. You need to increase your step target. You need to reduce maybe the carbohydrate you're taking in. So this is why you may have hit plateaus in the past and thought, what's going on? I don't know. I'm still doing the same thing, but I'm not seeing the results anymore. And then, you get demotivated and then maybe you fall off. And so where you start in your fat loss phase or stage is going to be very different to where you are a month in, 2 months in, 3 months in, because things have to change. Your body adapts. It has various different mechanisms to basically fight the calorie deficit. Ultimately, the body really doesn't want to be in a calorie deficit because it's counter survival. It doesn't like it because if you're not getting enough food in over time, however many thousands of years ago, that would have meant, okay, you're going to be in starvation. You're going to risk potentially dying. And so it's not a nice place for the body to be in. Yes, we want to look better, but the body doesn't necessarily see it in that way. So that is something to remember. The calorie deficit is counter survival, and the body is going to do things to try and make you eat or move less to burn less calories. So it will send signals for hunger cravings. It will send, those hunger pangs to keep you awake at night so that you actually search out some food in the fridge. So these are things that you will have to almost embrace, some feelings of hunger at times, because it is uncomfortable to disrupt the set point or the kind of status quo of where the body is at. And so I think, no, you were talking about socializing at the weekends. It's not quite beach life now that you're in Riyadh, but it must be close. So yeah, consistency is another big thing, because if, for example, here we are eating in a calorie deficit over the course of the week, and then maybe at the weekend, I know the weekdays are off, but maybe at the weekend you're then binging, you're eating a lot, maybe you're drinking soft drinks, that is, and you overdo the calories and you're in a surplus. What then happens is then over the week, you're at a maintenance. And so you may have seen great weight loss over the first, weekdays, then that jumped up over the weekend, and then you're losing that weight the following week, and then that cycle repeats itself again and again and again, and ultimately you just stay at maintenance. So consistency, as you know, is very important. And so our key fat loss pillars that we really look at focusing on: quality nutrition, strength training, and daily movement. A common misconception, as we've mentioned, is that all you need to lose fat is work out in the gym. You need to get to the gym, you need to train, all that kind of stuff. But no, that is only one pillar in what we are looking at. And there are different reasons why we do different things. Now, nutrition, as you know from the charts we were sharing earlier, we control the nutrition in order to control the amount of calories that are coming in. Fat loss only happens again when you're in a calorie deficit, no matter how hard you train, frequently or intensely you train. And also, this is another important point: there is no magic diet. So when people say, oh, intermittent fasting, I lose a load of weight on that, or keto, I lose a load of weight on that. Ultimately, what those systems do, or those approaches do, is restrict a whole food group or reduce the amount of time that you have to eat. Therefore, you consume fewer calories. Therefore, you put yourself in a calorie deficit, and therefore you lose weight. So again, there is no magic diet. It's only really the calorie deficit that comes into play. Obviously, there's different, perks to doing these things, but we don't sort of hold one of these approaches up as like the best for some, reason other than calorie deficit. There's other things that come into play which may suit your lifestyle or your schedule or whatever. Proper nutrition, as we harp on about, this is about fuel and nourishment. We want you to be fueled for your sessions and your day. We want you to be nourished with high quality nutrients, help you recover faster, help you build muscle, help you focus on targeting body fat and reducing that. And as we mentioned, high protein, plenty of fruit and veg, and overall portion control. So think of food as the number one priority for fat loss. So when Marvin is going through every week, counting your protein, seeing your free meals, this is what we are looking for. This is the number one driving factor. Now, strength training. The purpose of this is to build muscle, increase strength, performance, and obviously quality of life. When you are in a fat loss phase, one of the key purposes of strength training is to maintain the muscle mass that you have. You may have sort of seen it before if you've gone through an extreme fat loss phase, that actually you lose a lot of muscle, and therefore your body fat percentage can actually increase even though you have lost weight. So this is why it's really important to hold on to that muscle, to train hard, And, it helps also protect your metabolism during that fat loss. So again, this is dependent on you. Maybe it's 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week, but that is an individual thing that we work with each of you on. Now, the daily movement, this is, again, the easiest way of sorts to keep your calorie burn high during the day outside of the gym. And this is your walking, fidgeting, standing, going up and down stairs. All of this adds up. And the great thing about this is you have your whole day to walk more or to move more. That can be literally just popping over to the printer or something, or maybe taking the stairs or parking a little bit further away. But all of these add up over time and accumulate. So this is a really convenient way to boost fat loss without adding extra stress to your body. So obviously you've all got your targets based on that. Now, a special mention is cardio. So we must say this is hugely overrated for fat loss, but it can speed up results when strength training is prioritized, as is proper nutrition. You may have actually found that with cardio, your appetite goes through the roof afterwards, which obviously doesn't then help if you're trying to moderate the portion sizes that you're having in. And then also, cardiovascular health, super, super important as we age. Well, generally it's super important. And so making sure we have a strong heart, strong cardiovascular system is important for us as well, just generally outside of fat loss. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to share a example. So I'm not sure, I think she is in the room, but I'll pass over to Marvin here to give you a bit of an insight into what we look at when it comes to the weekly accountability.
So if you see how, might not mention names, if we see how the trackers here are looking, you can see how consistent this person is with regards to, the nutrition, the steps, the training. And this is what yields the results, right? So if we look at just the nutrition side, so on the right side of the tab, you can see that the protein is, actually going over the prescribed targets, 32, 36, 36, 32. So they're able to preserve muscle. They're eating enough fruits and vegetables. So, this amount of protein, this amount of fruit and vegetables is one of the easiest ways to reduce all the other extras, right? So if you are eating 32 servings of protein in a week, chances are you don't have room for, the croissant that I said earlier, or the burger, or whatever the case may be that you might be tempted by, when you walk past a little bagala or whatever it is. So these are the drivers that really, really, really make the biggest difference. If the training as well, super consistent with the training. So again, able to retain muscle mass. And then the steps, hitting 6 out of 7, 7 out of 7, a 5, a 4. But you can see that there is a great amount of consistency, which is the absolute key for maintaining or, getting the progress that this person's had. I mean, losing 6.9 kilos of that, 7 kilos was body fat, and actually gaining a little bit of muscle is pretty impressive, to do that in 11 weeks. And it's in a sustainable way too, because there are a couple of free meals here and there. When we speak to her, she says she doesn't feel like she's deprived of the food that she's eating. She feels like she's satiated. She feels like it's not difficult and feels like she could do this for the rest of her life. So you can tell that this is a really sustainable way of doing things.
And then we'll move into another example here. And this is 9 weeks in.
And now this is 9 weeks, so the rate of loss is a little bit different. So again, I think this is a really good comparison too for people, because I think a lot of people come in with this misconception of, I'm going to lose 10 kilos in 3 months, or I'm going to lose X amount of kilos in X amount of months. So this person's only lost 1.8 kilos in terms of, weight, total weight. However, there's been a body fat drop of 2.26%. And she feels better. She looks better, So there's that obvious thing that we don't want to always compare to others, or to come in with this preconceived notion of I have to be X, I have to be X. But again, the common theme is consistency, right? We're seeing the training here literally 100% across the 9 weeks. The steps don't go below 5 out of 7. And then and we even changed them. At some point, we increased to 8,000 steps because she was feeling like, I can actually, continue going, because the 7.5 was feeling like, I'm doing this very, very easily. Again, the protein really, really high, 26, 33, 27, 25. So at least about 80 to 90% in terms of hitting the targets, fruits and vegetables as well. And then the interesting thing is the free meals. So she's having a little bit more free meals. So which would then point to potentially why the progress hasn't been quite the same as the first person. But people are different, right? So she's okay with this rate of loss. She's okay keeping the odd free meal here and there. She's okay losing 0.18 kgs of body fat versus 5 kgs because she still wants to, have a meal with the friends, have this with, with family. So it also just points to the fact that, everyone's not going to be exactly the same. But if you largely maintain consistency and, hitting the targets as much as we, obviously try and preach and as much as you can, then you will see progress. The progress will obviously be different based on what you are hitting and what targets you are getting.
Exactly. So we are going to open it up to questions, and if anyone has questions, please get them into the chat box. I'll probably just again, while you're thinking, while you're writing, just mention on the sort of what is important to people in terms of priorities, right? And so we work with a vast range of clients who, some people really want to double down their efforts and throw everything at their journey. Other people, I don't know, maybe have a new family or maybe have started a new job and so need to be a little bit more sort of split with their time. But ultimately, the one thing that stays consistent across all the clients really is the fact that we set you targets that we have kind of come to agree based on your baseline, based on your schedule, what is achievable at this moment in time. And so we will always challenge you to hit those targets, which sometimes may feel a little bit out of reach, but with time, as you become more accustomed to the lifestyle change that you're wanting to lead, it will become easier. And we've had clients who have really, really struggled in the first 1, 2, 3 weeks, but then have finally something has clicked. They've seen the progress for themselves once they just focus on one aspect or two aspects and really see massive change coming through there. So can't see any questions at the moment. Marvin, any come to onto your mind based on what we've sort of experienced?
I've been in the chat just kind of clarifying things or responding to a couple of questions that have come in. So Sandra was asking about, because I had mentioned that protein also requires more energy to break down or digest food. And Sandra was asking for that clarification. So for those that didn't see that in the chat, another reason why we obviously want to keep a super high protein diet. And then Mo mentioned how a plateau is not necessarily no progress. It could be bloating, which is masking fat loss. And this is actually really right, Mo. We often see this, especially with our female clients, purely because, men and women are built differently, right? So hormonally, we're very different. Women go through periods and cycles. And so things change throughout, the entire month. They generally find that closer to their period, the weight kind of spikes up. And for those of you that are obviously working with us and seeing this, you notice that the weight starts to kind of go up and then peaks right around the time that you're having your period, and then it starts to come down again. And this is all due to water retention. It's not that you've put on body fat. It doesn't come on that quickly.
And then just to pick up on Aziz's question here first. So how does being in a calorie deficit impact sleep, restorative sleep, and physical recovery? And so I think it'll be worth going back to one of the slides we had earlier, whereby, the calorie deficit we are looking for is, maybe 10, 15%. So it is quite, small in terms of a deficit. If you are going like extreme and maybe are in a 20, 30% calorie deficit, then this is going to be really, really stressful for the body. And so that then is going to, spike levels of cortisol. It's going to have you in a state of like stress, right? Therefore, things like sleep, performance in the gym, and also physical recovery are all going to be impacted. And this is why a lot of the time people, when it comes to fat loss, and they go like super restrictive, maybe a 20, 30, 40% calorie deficit, lose a load of weight, some of it being muscle, but then it's totally unsustainable. And so they can't keep going for a long time. Then, because it's unsustainable, they stop, and therefore all the weight comes back on. And so, whilst what we do, as you probably know with myself and Marvin, we take things gradually. We focus on improving the lifestyle, the quality of nutrition, getting you training. That really is the best way to kind of ensure a nice, sustainable loss. And then just coming on to Firas's question here, or comment rather, this is like operator number 3 we have here. So he's right though, like discipline is a huge component to this. I think now that you understand what is happening here, it's important to then think as you go about your day, okay, I'm feeling a little hungry. What should I eat? Should I choose something that is going to help me maintain my calorie deficit? Or am I just going to follow my impulse or that instant gratification that I want from some of the food? So again, shout out to Firas for really struggling over the past 5 years, signing up with us during Ramadan and literally absolutely crushing it. So hats off to you, mate. And
Pete, do you want to touch on hunger real quick? Because this has been a common theme lately where everyone's like, oh, but I'm hungry. Oh, but I'm hungry. What do I do when I'm hungry? What do you
so I
do
think
when
I think yeah, so I think this is going to be something that we're going to look at in a following resource, just because it gets quite tactical, right? So hunger comes from, or cravings potentially come from, not getting enough fuel in, right? And therefore your body is sending signals to scream out to get you to eat something. And so we can be quite tactical here in terms of, we can eat bulky food. You can eat as much vegetable as you want. You can eat a lot of protein to really pad out the stomach and keep you fuller for longer. So that would be something. And then also, there's going to be an element of, as I mentioned before, the fact that, your body is in this survival mode. It wants to have abundance. It wants to eat. It wants to put on fat. It wants to, be satiated. And so the fact that you are essentially restricting it of the food it needs, it's going to send these signals, these hunger signals. And therefore, there is an element where you are, I think, as someone said to us before when we explained it to them, so I just have to suck it up. To some extent, yes,
Yeah.
in a way. Obviously, if you are starving, there's a reason for that. Maybe you're doing too much cardio. Maybe you are not eating enough. Maybe you are not, maybe it's just your time of the month, for example. So all these factors come into play, but there is an element of discomfort.
And there's also an element of boredom, right? Like a lot of people think I'm hungry, but they're genuinely just bored. So if you, especially considering the fact that you've come on here for lifestyle changes, you have probably have these ingrained habits of just snacking mindlessly, doing things just without even thinking about it. And so now that we're trying to get you to understand the calorie deficit, we're trying to get you to eat whole foods, you are obviously going to feel hungry and or feel bored and think, oh, I still need to snack. I still need to reach for whatever I need to reach for. And in reality, it's, well, we're changing the habits. We're trying to change to become more whole food centric rather than just picking the snacks and continuing to eat things when in reality, you don't actually need it.
For sure. And I think Samah has that here where, again, came to us, I think, just before Ramadan and was really nervous about getting into the gym and doing, and she has been absolutely on fire. And she's mentioned here just around the mindset side of things, right? Again, I'm sure you found if you're focusing on the scale, you're destined to live a miserable life. If you're focusing on, the daily drivers, me and Marvin, we talk a lot about behaving your way to success. If you're focusing on the nutrition targets, the workout, the daily movements, creating that more healthier, active lifestyle, this is going to be the thing that tips you over to transformation ultimately, and a good serving of patience at times. I think especially for sort of again, people who see the same number on the scale, but internally, as Mina has talked about up here, just the body composition or body recomposition is happening. You're losing fat, you're gaining muscle, and the scale only tells part of the story. Yes, absolutely right. Hunger pangs is out of habit, not necessarily real hunger. Sandra, eggs, protein shakes in the evening have helped me curb food cravings before bed. My go-to is one of those like Greek yogurt pots, a scoop of protein, mix it up, and that keeps me going, keeps me not necessarily full, but it keeps me, satiated to go to bed without feeling too hungry. So I think, three things probably to finish on if there's no more questions. Well, obviously the first one, calorie deficit. Hopefully you have a really good understanding as to what it is now and how we build it, and ultimately how we help you understand what you need to do in order to reach it. The second one I would say is Firas, who mentioned discipline. Absolutely, that is something that we build with time, and ultimately the more action you take, the more confident you're going to be, the more results you're going to see in the process. And Sama, I think we need to mention that patience. A lot of the times we kind of get to points where we are like just at a tipping point, like another week and things would totally change. But sometimes we kind of are demotivated or want to give up, or we don't, continue hitting our targets because we don't think we're ever going to get there. But patience, and again, behaving your way to the results, looking after those daily performance measures is the key to this process. So, Shukran, thank you for obviously taking your time this evening. I don't think there's any more questions or comments. I know we have gone over, and this was a bit of a test, really, to see how long these things take. So I think we are looking at we're going to look at doing these probably every fortnight, potentially every 3 weeks. If you want us to delve into certain topics, please just fire them to myself or Marvin or within the groups. And yeah, thank you for joining. Any final thoughts, Marvin?
This has been good, Pete. I think we've really had a good turnout as well. Thank you, everyone, for coming through. And hopefully all of this has been super, super impactful, and it's been simplified, right? So now it's time to behave your way to results.
And just lastly, Aziz, absolutely. I thought we would struggle with Mr. Indomie over in Boston, but man, your progress is incredible. So once again, everyone, thank you for joining. I will share the recording as well. And if you do have any areas you want us to focus on or look at in the future, please just ping them our way. So good night. Masalama, and we'll be in touch.